following the Yom Tov of Pesach, this is the Shabbos which we always bench the month of Iyar. However, there are different kviyasim when the last day of Pesach falls out. For example, this year there is only one day between the last day of Pesach and Shabbos. In other words, the last day of Pesach came out on Thursday. The last day of Pesach is always the same day in the week as is the first day of Pesach. In between we had the day of Yisroel Chag, which is already a Yom HaMaaseh, a day that we are permitted to do work and we are supposed to do work. And then right after we have the Shabbos, which comes following this Yom Tov. There can be kviyasim that Achan Shel Pesach itself should fall out on a Shabbos. In other words, the last day of Pesach is on a Shabbos, and then there is a complete week between Achan Shel Pesach and the following Shabbos. How much more so is it, though, when Achan Shel Pesach falls out in the middle of the week, and then comes the Shabbos following Yom Tov, this Shabbos elevates the entire week. As it's explained in Chassidus, B'negeya vayechulu hashamayim v'ha'oretz, which this applies to Shabbos. So Chassidus explains that everything is being elevated on Shabbos, and elevated to what level? To the madrega of oinig, of a spiritual satisfaction, because this is the whole idea of Shabbos, stands for v'karasa la Shabbos oinig. So all inyanim that have transpired throughout the entire week, come Shabbos, these inyanim come to a yet higher madrega, coming to a madrega of oinig. The Rebbe referred to the famous story which the Gemara tells us about the Roman emperor. Initially he was a Roman general, and when he was told that he was being appointed as a Roman ruler, it happened to be so that one foot was in the shoe and the other foot was not in the shoe, the Gemara tells us. So his other foot wasn't able to go and fit into the shoe. And the Gemara applies to it the pasuk, Shmua Tova Tedashein Etzem. That Shmua Tova, good news, Tedashein Etzem, can even fatten a bone. In other words, a bone is a spot which usually does not even grow in the person's body. And here we're talking about a person who was already past the stage of growing b'chlal. So here we see how much a Shmua Tova can have an effect on a person, that even in Etzem, within a person, can become Tedashein, can grow. What is Shmua Tova? Shmua Tova means good news. Can affect this Etzem, that the Etzem should grow to such an extent that he wasn't able to fit it into his shoe. What do we get from this? How much the idea of Shmua Tova, which is Shmua Tova is good news, this causes a feeling of oineg. So the same applies to Negei Shabbos. The same idea is the Negei Shabbos, that Shabbos is a super high elevation, something which brings the Yid to the madrega of oineg, that all the inyanim that have taken place throughout the entire week are reaching a yet higher spiritual elevation. So, in the Achan Shel Pesach, the Farbrengen, the Rebbe discussed the greatness of Shvi Shel Pesach in general, and Achan Shel Pesach in particular. Because Shvi Shel Pesach is the last day, is the first day of the last days of Pesach. What happened on Shvi Shel Pesach? Kriyas Yamsuf. What do we find in Negei Kriyas Yamsuf? That when the Yidden crossed the sea, they all exclaimed, Zeh Keli V'Anveyu. They all pointed to God. Zeh, pointing directly at him. In other words, that every Yid at Shvi Shel Pesach reached such a high madrege that he physically recognized the Eibishter and exclaimed, Zeh Keli, this is my God, V'Anveyu, and I will glorify him. The Gemara, Chazal referred to this, that Ro'as HaShifcha al Hayam, Ma Shelo Yira Godel Shebeneviyim. A Shifcha, a plain maid, was able to see greater things by Kriyas Yamsuf as one of the greatest of the Nevi'im, as the Gemara refers to Ben Buzi Yecheskel, Ben Buzi, who was one of the greatest Nevi'im, the Navi Yecheskel. And a Shifcha, a plain Jewish maid, was able to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu by Kriyas Yamsuf. So this in itself already shows us how great is the day of Shvi Shel Pesach. Shvi Shel Pesach is a day when every Yid can identify the Rebishter by pointing directly at him. Zeh Keli, this is my God. Comes Achan Shel Pesach, the day after Shvi Shel Pesach, it's yet greater yet. The Rebbe referred today, and he explained at length in the Achan Shel Pesach Farbrengen, that the Achan Shel Pesach serves as the climax of the entire Yom Tov of Pesach. And Achin Shel Pesach already has a shaykhs not only to Yetzias Mitzrayim. Here already we celebrate the Geula HaSida, the Geula which we're going to have through Mashiach. And it's reflected in Halacha Lamaisa as well, that even the Kriyas HaTorah and is something which does not deal with Yetzias Mitzrayim, and particularly the Haftarah which we say on Achin Shel Pesach, the contents of the Haftarah deal solely about Mashiach. So this is already a celebration of a Yom Tov which we celebrate something which has a shaykhs with the Geula HaSida, the Geula which is about to come. The Rebbe also referred, he spoke about it at length in the Achin Shel Pesach, the Farbrengen, Achin Shel Pesach, the Rebbe spoke about it, Al Pi Halacha as well, something which we refer to in the Haggadah, Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the question, if when Mashiach will come, we will also be obligated to refer to Yetzias Mitzrayim. Obviously, as we say in the Haggadah, it's a machloikis between Ben Zayim and the Chachamim. Whether when we meet on Mashiach, we will also be maskir Yetzias Mitzrayim. In the Achin Shel Pesach, the Farbrengen, the Rebbe spoke a whole pilpul on it, based on a Rambam, two different areas. There's the Rambam, where the Rambam tells us how we are to recite Krishma daily, and there the Rambam explains that the reason we recite Krishma at night is one of the main reasons because we have to refer to Yetzias Mitzrayim. And the Rambam uses the expression that this is a mitzvah. So, the Rebbe explained Achin Shel Pesach, the Rambam uses the expression mitzvah. Mitzvah usually is only on something which is an inyan mitzri, which is something which remains that way eternally. Something which is only temporary, the terminology of mitzvah does not apply to it. Memela, if we see from the Rambam, the Rebbe wanted to bring a raya that we see from the Rambam, that the Rambam holds that even when Mashiach will come, the Rambam holds we will also be mentioning Yetzias Mitzrayim then as well. Because the Rebbe says the Rebbe spoke a whole arichas, he began speaking about it at the Yud Aleph Nissen Farbrengen and spoke about it again Achin Shel Pesach and referred to it briefly today. The Rebbe says that it's hard to say, we cannot imagine that the Krishma, which we will be saying, La'asid Lavai, will be a Krishma that will consist only of two parshas, Shema v'Hafta and V'Hayim Shemaya. It's very strange to say such a svara, the Rebbe says. So we must say that Krishma will always remain the same. When we use the expression Krishma, the term Krishma, we refer to all three parshas, Vayomer as well. Why do we mention Vayomer in the Krishma of the evening? So the Rambam explains, Min Adin, Min HaTorah, there's no mitzvah of Tzitzis Balayla. So we cannot say that we say Parshas Vayomer because of mitzvah tzitzis. So if we do say Parshas Vayomer, which is part of Krishma, which we recite every evening, we must say we say Vayomer because of the Yetzias Mitzrayim that is mentioned in it. And being that a person is obligated to refer to Yetzias Mitzrayim, Sai Vayomer, Sai Balayla, so Balayla we mention Yetzias Mitzrayim, we fulfill the mitzvah of mentioning Yetzias Mitzrayim by reciting Krishma. If we see from the Rambam, it seems from the Rambam, as the Rebbe kept on stressing, that there will be no change as far as this halacha when Mashiach will come. And when Mashiach will come, we will also be reciting all three parshas every night. So from here we see that the Rambam holds that even when Yemais HaMashiach, we will also be obligated to refer to Yetzias Mitzrayim. But again, getting back to this inyan, Achin Shel Pesach is a Yom Tov which stands for very strongly the Geula HaSida, the Geula to come. So here we tell a Yid that after all the great inyanim which a person has gone through on these Yomim Tovim, Shvi'ah Shel Pesach, afterwards comes Achin Shel Pesach, which is a yet greater day, comes the Shabbos. After Shvi'ah Shel Pesach and after Achin Shel Pesach, a Yid acquires a yet higher madrega in Kedusha, because on this Shabbos, all the inyanim which have taken place throughout the entire week are being elevated in the spiritual aliyah, in the spiritual elevation, a very high one, as we just referred to the aliyah of Shabbos. So here, a Yid has a chance to come to a yet higher madrega, higher yet than the madregas of the last days of Pesach. Which this is what the Shabbos of after Pesach stands for. As Rebbe explained, we cannot have it. Rebbe explained we must always have that if Pesach falls out during the week, it must always be that there should be time between Pesach and Shabbos. In other words, Achin Shel Pesach can never fall out to be on a Friday. Why? Because Achin Shel Pesach is always the same day as the Thursday Pesach. And we have a cloud from the Chachamim Loi bidu Pesach, that the first day Pesach can never fall out to be on a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. So Mamela Achan Shel Pesach could be eaten on a Thursday, or could be eaten on another day of the week, but there must always be a day in between. This day in between is already a Yom HaMaisa. And as the Torah tells us, Hashem Elokecha b'chol asher taseh, that the Rebbeinu will bench, bless every Yid and everything that he will do. So the Chazal use the expression, there's a mechilta, zu mitzvah saseh, that a person is obligated to do things in order to be able to provide himself and sustain himself with whatever needed.
So Mamela, between Pesach and this Shabbos, we already have a day that we were involved in Yonei HaOlam. So when we're talking about people who are identified as Zavul, in other words, people who are merchants and who are not involved in Torah, they definitely had a day that they were involved already in Yonei HaOlam. Even when we are talking about people who are not identified as Zavul, people who are identified as Yisachar, in other words, people who their inyan is involvement in Torah. So to them as well, the V'rachacha Hashem Elokecha b'chol asher taseh applies to an Asiyah in Torah. In other words, they have to dwell in Torah, and their inyan is to be constantly involved in Torah. So they already also had a day between Pesach and Shabbos, which they were involved in other inyanim. They were involved in Torah, but Torah not as it has a shaykhus to Pesach or Shabbos. So after being involved in other inyanim, here we come back to this Shabbos, which comes after Pesach, and this Shabbos we have such a high elevation, such a high aliyah, such a kiloyon, and oineg, which we come to a yet higher madrege as we were in the days of Yontif, which were in the middle of the week. And here the Rebbe referred that in the Rambam we find that when the Rambam describes Yemais HaMashiach, he says that Yemais HaMashiach, that's the Rambam in Yad HaChazaka, in his Halacha Sefer. The Rambam does not refer to any types of nisim v'neflois that will be taking place then. The Rambam only describes that it will be a period, an era of madanim ka'ofa. We will have jewels, will be such multiplication as offer as dust. In other words, wealth will not play any role. Everybody will possess it and everybody will have it. This is how he describes it in the Yad HaChazaka. Then the Rebbe said there's an Igeres Teiman from the Rambam. It's a letter which the Rambam wrote to the Yemenite Jews, to the Yidden in Teiman. The Rebbe said the Rambam wrote to them as to awaken them, to be the Me'oira, to awaken them and encourage them and bring them encouragement for Geula. And in these letters, the Rambam describes what it's going to be like, what the world is going to be like when Mashiach will come. And the Rambam gives there an Atlant description that tremendous nisim v'neflois will be taking place when Mashiach will come. The Rebbe explained, being that both things were written by the Rambam himself, it's very hard to say that the Rambam contradicts himself between his Igeres Teiman and his Yad HaChazaka, which is his Halacha Sefer. However, naturally, we know we are to follow the Piskei Dinim of the Rambam in his Halacha Sefer, but being that this was written by the Rambam, the Rebbe said, we find something very interesting. The Yad HaChazaka is Halachas. So the Rambam wrote it as halachas should be written. Al Pi Seder, from one perek, another perek, each perek is broken up into various halachas. Igeres Teiman, which is the correspondence which the Rambam wrote to the Yidden in Teiman, there the Rambam writes it with a tremendous koch, with a tremendous involvement. He gets with a tremendous enthusiasm, or the entire description which he writes to those Yidden, where he gives them awakening for that a time will come when Mashiach will take us out, and will come the time of Geula. The Rambam writes it with a tremendous enthusiasm and tremendous expressions of enthusiasm. The Rebbe said what we must say in order to straighten out between the two writings of the Rambam, is the best would be to say that even after the coming of Mashiach there will be two periods. One period, Take, which as it's defined in the Yad HaChazaka, it will be a period of Madanim Ka'ofa and without any Nisim V'neflois. However, there will be a later period, or another period, and this is what the Rambam refers to in his Igeres Teiman, that will be a time of tremendous nisim v'neflois, which the Rebbe will perform in the time of Mashiach. Could we leave? I just said it's a letter which the Rambam wrote to the Jews in Teiman, in Yemen. Then the Rebbe went on explaining, today is also Shabbos Mevorchim Iyah. What is the avodah of Shabbos Mevorchim Iyah? So it's explained in Chassidus in the Kabbalah Svarim that Iyar is an abbreviation. Avram, Yitzchak, Yankov, Rochel. Which this is the Daled Ragle HaMerkava are these four, and the month of Iyar abbreviates this abbreviation. So what does this show us, benegayet to us? What type of lesson can we take from this? What can we derive, benegayet the lesson, what we can take from the month of Iyar? The Rebbe went on to explain that Iyar calls for serving the Rebishter, servicing the Rebishter as a Merkava. Let's explain the Hasidus at length. Tanya right away in the beginning, what's the whole meaning of a Merkava? So Hasidus explains, a Merkava means a wagon. What's the pshat? Just like a wagon that travels. The wagon is totally bottled, does not have any feeling of his own. Wherever he's being driven to, that's where the wagon goes. The very same, we are supposed to have a total dedication to the Rebishter. This is what the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, just like the others, Hein Hein HaMerkava. The others are also defined with this title that they were a Merkava. So the same thing, this is the Avodah which is demanded from us for this month of Iyar, that in the month of Iyar we are reminded that we have to service the Rebishter in the format of a Merkava. In other words, put ourselves totally aside and be totally dedicated to the will of the Rebishter. Here the Rebbe referred that it's brought in the writings of Frierdiker Rebbe about a mashal, that if one would really imagine in front of himself that as he's standing in front of a king, in front of a melech basar v'dam, naturally he would have a tremendous aim, a tremendous fear will come upon him, and it may lead to such an extent that as a result of the fear which is befalling this person, he may faint. So here the Rebbe got into an inyan. He said that the Hasidus we don't find much discussions, much explanations in Mishalim. However, who is really very famous from Mishalim, it is the Dubna Maggid. The Dubna Maggid, the Rebbe spoke a few minutes about him, that the Dubna Maggid was very, very great and very outstanding, and he's noted for it. For the inyan of Mishalim, he would always find a very suitable parable to explain any type of inyan. And Rebbe said that it's the writings of the Dubna Maggid that really had impact on many people. Sayin, Sur Meira, keeping them away from doing wrong, from doing evil things, as well as in the Kav of Asay Toiv, seeing to it that they should do the proper things. However, in Hasidus itself, we do not find that much the inyan of Mishalim. As talking about Me'inyan Le'inyan, the Rebbe here spoke, the Rebbe said it is known that the Rebbe has instituted that the Rebbe is very much against the idea of drinking mashke. And here the Rebbe explained what's bechlal the inyan of drinking mashke by Chassidim. Where does it all originate from? The Gemara says that mashkin is a behemoth, benegei a behemoth. A behemoth would have a sircha. Sircha means in the lung of the behemoth there would be something which wouldn't be smooth, wouldn't be proper. Excuse me? Okay. So in order, before the shechita, to get this lesion off the behemoth would be, it's a Gemara in Masechta Be'er, at the end of Masechta Be'er. The Gemara there discusses mashkin as a behemoth. So the behemoth would be wetted in order that these sircha should come off the behemoth. So what is a sircha? A sircha is the pshat. It's something that interferes with the rei, is something that interferes with the lung. How is the lung supposed to function? Applying the terminology of Chassidus in a format of Ratzui V'Shoy. What's the pshat? This is the whole basics of Avodas Hashem, of serving the Rebishter. As it's explained in Chassidus, we serve the Rebishter in a format of Ratzui V'Shoy. What's the pshat? There's a sircha on the rei, there's a sircha on the lung. This means that there's something interfering with us servicing the Rebishter. So Mamela, this is where the custom has originated, that in order to get off the sircha, the interference, to serve the Rebishter in a proper way, Hasidim have always utilized the method of drinking a little bit of mashke. However, the Rebbe said that the proper way to do it, what do we refer to by mashke, that gets off the sircha? Mashke is mayim. Chazal tell us, Ein mayim ela Torah. What is the proper water? Torah. So in order if a Yid has some sort of an interference, something that interferes with him and does not let him function properly in his spiritual breathing and his spiritual serving the Rebishter, which is compared to just like the functioning of a lung, he's required to wet it. How does he wet it? By drinking the waters of Torah, in mayim ela Torah. However, there's still a Hasidic custom, the idea of drinking a little bit of mashke and saying l'chaim. The Rebbe said, however, it is known that he has instituted and spoken out very strongly against drinking a lot of mashke, and at the most, at any given occasion, at any Farbrengen, one should not say more than 4 times l'chaim. The Rebbe said that somebody obviously, the Rebbe kept on repeating today the number of 4. Number of 4. Today and in the previous Farbrengen as well. So the Rebbe said that somebody came into him and asked him that obviously he needs more. The 4 times saying l'chaim is not sufficient for him. It doesn't help him to get the sircha off his reya. The Rebbe said he has an advice for him. Whatever he can do as far as saying l'chaim is fine. So in Russia, how was yash? Yash is an abbreviation of yayin saraf. When in Svarim, if you want to refer to mashke, to vodka, to liquor, the expression is used yash, yayin saraf, a burning wine. So how was yash made? Yash was made from wheat. The Meir Rebbe said he told the person he has an eitzah. Let him take something which is made from wheat. Let him eat an additional piece of bread, or an additional piece of challah. And the Meir, he'll imagine as he has additional mashke. And this will have the same accomplishment as additional mashke should have, because again mentioned to drink more mashke than 4 times l'chaim definitely does not have any impact, does not have any help. So Mele from here, the Rebbe was trying to explain that with the koyach of imagination, one can accomplish something as well. On the other hand, the Rebbe said, let us not fool ourselves. We have to, when it comes to a halachic requirement, whereby al pi halacha we are mechuyev to drink something which is mashke, or not even mashke wine, or a chamar medina, as the expression in Shulchan Aruch is. If one has to make Havdalah, and he's going to say he's going to eat a piece of bread, being that vodka can be made, or liquors can be made out of bread, the mele he's going to be Yotza Havdalah with eating this piece of bread, this definitely cannot be so. But again, Kiddush is something else. Kiddush can be made al pi halacha, Kiddush can be made on Lechem Mishnah as well. But for example, B'negei Havdalah, where we have a requirement that we have to have something which is defined as a Chamar Medina al Pi Shulchan Aruch, here we can't say that we're going to eat an additional piece of bread. B'negei is saying extra times l'chaim, the piece of bread, a piece of challah could be utilized. However, where there's a halachic requirement which binds us what we are supposed to do in this specific case, here we cannot go ahead and say we'll eat an extra piece of bread. And the Rebbe got into all this me'inyan le'inyan. Then the Rebbe got back to the inyan of the Chodesh Iyar, of the month of Iyar. So Amela, getting back to the month of Iyar, here a Yid is told that after the month of Nisan, we come to a yet higher madrege, the month of Iyar. And it all goes in the proper sequence. Why? Because Nisan is a very high inyan. What's the inyan of Nisan? The Gemara tells us in Brachas, the Gemara says if a person sees 2 nuns in his dream, Nisi Nisim Nasuloi. It's a simon that he's going to have a tremendous amount of miracles, a multiple amount of miracles being performed to him. So this is Nisim, 2 nuns. The word Nisim is written with 2 nuns. There's a nun at the beginning, as well as a nun at the end. So Mele, Nisim is a very tremendous high madreg. So what's the pshat? If the Yid has gone through the Avodah of Nisan, and this Avodah of Nisan has elevated the person to the level of Nisim Nasuloi. And here the Rebbe added on that in Chassidus it's explained that Nes has another interpretation. Besides Nes meaning miracle, Nes also means Orim Nisi. It elevates the person. The person who the Nes is performed with becomes elevated, becomes Derhaim, becomes Ufgaim. So Mamela, the pshat is, after we have gone through the month of Nisan, we have reached a higher madrege, we have been elevated in the spiritual sense. Now that we've been elevated in the spiritual sense, we can go into the Avodah of Iyar and the Avodah of the month of Merkava.
Rebbe brought an example, just like we find Shabbos and Motzei Shabbos. Shabbos Yid is at a very high level. Comes Motzei Shabbos, there's some that say in Zmiras Motzei Shabbos, Al Tira Avdi Yankov. Don't be afraid, Yaakov. What's the pshat? Don't be afraid, Yaakov. In other words, Shabbos we were in a very high madrege. We had no shaykhs to Inyanim Gashmiyim. It comes Motzei Shabbos, a Yid falls back into the world with all its obstacles, with all its interferences to Avodas Hashem. So a Yid is told that with the koyach of the Avodah of Shabbos, we tell a Yid, Al Tira Avdi Yankov, don't fear Yankov. You will be able to overcome the weak, and you will be able to have strength enough to hold out the week and be able to serve Hashem properly. Where does a Yid get these koyches from? The koyches from this we get from Shabbos. So Shabbos, just like Shabbos gives us koyches into the entire week, the same thing the month of Nisan gives us a tremendous amount of koyach to be able to go through the Avodah of the month of Iyar. Throughout the Farbrengen, the Rebbe learned a Rashi, as well as spoke an Inyan, Behemshach, to the Achish al Pesach Farbrengen, which also involves a Rashi in this week's Sedra, learned the Mishnah and Pirkei Avos, learned Ha'aras and Zoya, and also spoke about the new kapitel, the Rebbe's new kapitel, kapitel Peyalef, where the pasuk uses the expression Harchef Picha v'Amalehu. And as the Rebbe kept on referring in the last couple of Farbrengens, the expression Harchef Picha v'Amalehu, broaden your mouth and I will fill it up. Rebbe said that there's an interpretation in Bavli, in Gemara. There's also an interpretation about it in Yerushalmi. In Bavli, Gemara says that it applies to Divrei Torah. In other words, that a person is supposed to broaden his mouth, b'negei Divrei Torah. A person is really supposed to fill oneself up with Divrei Torah. The Yerushalmi tells us that it's talking about Inyanim Gashmiyim. That the Rebishter says that if a Yid will daven to him properly, a person will arrange his tefillas, will be mesader his tefillas. Accordingly, the Rebishter will respond to him and give him a tremendous amount of Gashmiyas. The Rebishter will fulfill his will totally. So while talking about these Inyanim, the Rebbe began talking about the situation of Hasidim here, as opposed to the situation of Hasidim behind the Iron Curtain. The Rebbe said that we do not appreciate the chances that we are given. We are constantly complaining and we're constantly not satisfied. And he says, we always think that the neighbor has it better, or a friend has it better. Here the Rebbe referred to a famous word from the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Nishma Seiden once expressed himself as he was talking, came out to be one of his greatest Hasidim, was a giant in learning and understanding of a Torah, was involved in a kalashas business, in a business of rubbers. So the Rebbe Nishma Seiden wasn't satisfied with it, so he expressed himself that he already saw feet in kalashas. However, he never saw a head in kalashas, referring to this person who put his mind totally into a kalashas business. Today the Rebbe says we can use a different expression. There is something which is further from us yet than kalashas. And what is this? A carpet. A carpet is something which is totally not something which a person wears, it's something which we step on. And here there are people that are unsatisfied if they cannot afford having a proper wall-to-wall carpet. The Rebbe says they are totally unsatisfied and they have sleepless nights, and it interferes with their complete servicing of the Rebbe, without being involved in an union of Afatas HaMayones, not to say to go out to see to it that other Yidden should get ICS and Sefer Torah, and even if they do rip themselves away and get 1 or 2 or 3 at the most people that should have an ICS Sefer Torah, they begin thinking about themselves that mi Yidmaloi, there is no one that is the equal of this person. He has done that much, he has done so much that he got 3 people to have letters in the Sefer Torah. So the Rebbe says, if we had to think back as it was when we were in Russia, the situation there was by far worse. And here, Baruch Hashem, we are living in a country where everybody has their needs, some more, some less. And Rebbe stressed several times, as long as a person makes a living and earns an honest living without any swindle, he can have his needs and whatever he needs for himself and to sustain himself and his family. However, Yidden in Russia have to go through Mesiras Nefesh to put on tefillin. And he began describing that a Yid in Russia cannot go to shul to put on tefillin, because if he will be seen going to shul with his tefillin, then he will be fired from his job. And a job of a person simply means his life's necessities. On the other hand, to be able to put on tefillin at home, he should lock his door for the couple of minutes that he wants to put on tefillin. Rabbi says in Russia, when a person locks his door, he's immediately accused that he's doing something against the government. People there do not live in the size of apartments that we have, that they have many rooms, so that somebody who is next door and will see him putting on tefillin at an open door, the Rebbe goes, he does not know who his next door neighbor is, and perhaps it could be a Master Rahman al-Islam, somebody which will go ahead and relate that he saw this person putting on tefillin. So Mamela, the mere putting on tefillin there, or even wearing of tzitzis, behautenahate, hiddenly, not tzitzis out, somebody should see that he wears tzitzis, but wearing tzitzis hiddenly, as well as putting on tefillin, is something which is literal Mesiras Nefesh. For example, to observe Pesach in Russia, the Rebbe says, whoever has a kezayis matzah, only a kezayis, to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of achilas matzah, is extremely happy. The Rebbe was crying very strongly while talking all about this. And he's very happy, and this is the real fulfillment of a chak kosher v'sameach, to be able to have a kosher and happy Pesach to this person, if he can carry through the Pesach on potatoes, which he knows does not have the chash of chametz, and as long as he had a kezayis matzah for the night of the Seder, the person is extremely happy. Rabbi says people there cannot have the joy that we have on Simchas Torah to dance in the streets. They definitely cannot have the pleasure of going in a tahalucha like we go on Yom Tovim and go ahead and bring joy to other Yidden. All these things are totally forbidden from them. And it involves mamish Mesiras Nefesh. And the Rebbe says, should they even want to be Zech Moisa Nefesh for this, they also can't achieve it. The Rebbe used the expression Mesiras Nefesh applies if one wants to jump from the roof down, it's Shaykh Mesiras Nefesh. But a person cannot say he's going to have Mesiras Nefesh to jump up to a roof. It's not possible. It's just physically impossible. And the Rebbe says, should a person there be caught in participating in a Hasidic Farbrengen, then he says the person would be arrested, and not only he would be arrested, but as well his wife and his children, his entire family would be arrested. The Rebbe says we know what type of circumstances the Yidden there go through when they are arrested, but not only are they arrested and they're taken away from their panasa, but they're also physically beaten, Rahman al-Islam, as well, while they are in prison. So from all this we can see what type of Mesiras Nefesh a Yid in Russia has to go through for the fulfillment of a mitzvah, whether it's the mitzvah of tefillin or it's any other type of a mitzvah, mamish Mesiras Nefesh. And here we really don't appreciate the situations that we are in, and we are constantly unsatisfied, and we are making a big issue in order that we should be able to achieve something which is, the Rebbe uses, which is defined as wall-to-wall carpeting. And this is something which plays a tremendous role in our minds, that should we have it, and we should have it equally, not at any worse as the neighbor has it or as the friend has it. And really, how foolish are we when we are making issues of such type of things? The Rebbe quoted the Gemara, Chazal. The Chazal say on the pasuk, "In b'chukoisai telechu, v'mitzvoisai tishmoru," and the Rebbe was shedding tears. Ein im el lashon bakosha. The expression of im is a lashon of a request, of a please, that the Rebbe is begging Yidden, please, b'chukoisai telechu, v'mitzvoisai tishmoru. He's begging of Yidden that they should please do him a favor. They should be kind enough to learn Torah and observe mitzvahs. This is what the Rebbe is begging of Yidden. And as the Rebbe kept on talking about these inyanim, the Rebbe again alerted on the importance of all of the 10 mitzvahim, and particularly the mitzvah of Sefer Torah, which he's talking about for quite some time already, and which we really have to realize the greatness of this mitzvah, to see to it that every Yid should have an oisna Sefer Torah. The Rebbe referred to a maimah of the Friedrich Rebbe, where the Friedrich Rebbe writes that about Yisrael, yesh shishim ribu oisi Yisrael Torah. So the Frierdiker Rebbe writes there that every Yid receives his chayes, his life, his sustenance he receives from his Oisen Torah. So Mamela, again we see how important it is that each and every Yid should have an Oisen in the Sefer Torah. In the Farbrengen of Achen Shel Pesach, the Rebbe teacht us a Rashi in Parsha Shemini, in the Parsha of the day. In other words, Achen Shel Pesach was on Thursday, so it was a pasuk in Chamishi, which the Rebbe explained the Rashi on the pasuk of Kapitel Yud pasuk Chav. Vayishma Moshe vayitav b'yeinav. I'm sorry, a pasuk prior to that, pasuk Yud Tes. Hayitav b'einei Hashem. So Rashi says that there are two concepts. There's a concept of Kochei Shah, and there's a concept of Kochei Doiris. So, very interestingly, in the Farbrengen of Achen Shel Pesach, the way the Rebbe explained it then, not as it says in the Rashi. Rebbe then explained it and built an entire Hira, an entire lesson, what we can derive from it, basing it that Kochei Shah require more Chumrah than Kochei Doiris. In other words, here in the parasha what has taken place was there were temporary korbanos and there were korbanos which are constant korbanos. Kochei Doiris means a korban which we bring constantly. Kochei Shah is a temporary korban. The Rebbe in the Achen Shel Pesach Farbrengen explained that today as well there are concepts of ongoing concepts and they are temporary in Yon. When something is ongoing, when we know there's something which we do it constantly, this we do with all carefulness. Why? We know that this is something which we are doing it, our fathers did it, our grandfathers did it. The Mela, we know it's something we have to do it, something which we have to live up with. However, when a new union comes up, this can be defined as Kochei Shah. It's something temporary. So, the Rebbe was talking Achen Shel Pesach that Rashi here comes to tell us that either when we come to something temporary, Kochei Shah, we also, in other words, the Rebbe learned the Rashi in the Achen Shel Pesach Farbrengen, Ein Lecha Lahakel, you cannot be mekel the Kochei Shah. In other words, when something temporary comes, here we need an extra cautiousness. We have to be cautioned extra. We have to be careful about it extra, and to see that we will fulfill this union properly. The Rebbe said that he's very thankful and very appreciative that between Achen Shel Pesach and Shabbos, in other words, in Friday's day, the Rebbe got correspondence that as he explained the union, it is contrary as the union says in Rashi. Rashi says Punkt verkehrt. If we look into Rashi, Rashi says Im shamaita bekochei shah, ein lecha lahakel bekochei doiras. In other words, we can be easy, we can be lenient in something that is temporary. However, something which is kochei doiras, something which is eternal, there we cannot be lenient. So as the Rebbe explained today, firstly the Rebbe explained the whole union al pi halacha, brought rayos from Gemara, raising the question that obviously Kochei Shah is something which requires more warning and we should be more careful about it as Kochei Deiros, as just explained. Why? Because Kochei Deiros means something which we have been doing constantly, something we've been into constantly. Not only we, but our ancestors and grandfathers and so forth. If they have been adopted, if they adopted an Indian. So once this thing became a tradition in the family, and tradition in the community, it's not hard for us to do it. So naturally we'll be able to fulfill it. However, if we're trying to introduce a new chumrah, a new type of inyan, it's hard. It's not so easy. And from here, the Rashi, we see that Rashi uses a contrary approach. If we look into Rashi, we will see that Rashi uses an approach, Im shamaita bekochei shah, ein lecha lahakel bekochei doires. That Aaron told Moshe that in something which is temporary, you could be very lenient about. However, something which is eternal, ein lecha lahakel, you cannot be easy about it. So as the Rebbe explained it today, the Horoya, the lesson we can take out of this, that Rashi, naturally Rashi is firstly
talking to a Ben Chumash Lamikra, to a 5-year-old, to the children who are learning Chumash. And Rashi here is giving us a klal in chinuch, a general rule in education of a child. Kodshe Shah means something temporary. What's the pshat temporary? While a child is growing up, they are temporary inyanim. Kodshe Doiras is when a person becomes an adult. Once he's an adult, he's stable, and whatever he does today, he has to keep on doing tomorrow and the day after, and the day after, and the year after, and so on. There are no changes. It remains that way. However, we see that to children, we have to be lenient at times. And this is what Rashi here is giving us, a rule in chinuch. Im shamaita bekodshe shah, ein lecha lahakel bekodshe doiras. To a child at times, in order to be able to be mechanech the child properly, in order to be able to educate the child in a format of chanoich lanar al pidarkoi, gam ki yaskin leyoser mimenu, as the pasuk tells us, raise the child in such a way that even when he will grow older, he will not turn away from this path, and he will stick to what you're putting into him, to the way you're educating him. So at times, the Rebbe says, we have to be lenient to a child. However, at the same time, while we are expressing this feeling of leniency to the child has to be told and has to be cautioned that this is done to him now only because he's a child. However, the time will come when he will fit into a category of kodshe doiros, he will become an adult, then we wouldn't be able to be any lenient to him any longer. Then he will be mechuyev to do everything accordingly. He will be obligated to do everything to the fullest extent of the halacha. Ein lecha lahakel b'kodshe doiros. The Rebbe says, this Rashi in Emerson says, in Mechilta it says, in other sources as well. However, wherever the content of the Rashi is mentioned, the expression ein lecha lahakel is not used. For example, in Mechilta the Rebbe says, the expression is im shamate b'kodshe shah. By kodshe shah we can be more lenient. Ein lelamed l'kodshe doiros. We cannot learn from kodshe shah and kodshe doiros. Rashi, as an educator, and telling us and teaching us how we are to educate our children, and Rashi himself addressing himself to the youngsters, is using the expression ein lecha lahakel. You cannot be lenient, because Rashi here is giving us a complete view of how to educate a child. A child is considered as kodshe shah. It's everything by Yiddish kedusha. Everything is kodesh. However, there is kodshe shah, there is temporary inyanim, and there are eternal inyanim, kodshe doiros. Once the person reaches the stage of an adult, we refer to him as kodshe doiros. By kodshe doiros, ein lecha lahakel. There is no inyan of being lenient to adults. Adults are mechuyev to do everything perfectly. However, by a child, as long as he's still in the category of kodshe shah, in order to be able to educate him properly, at times we have to come on to an attitude of a little bit of leniency. Naturally, we have to know where to apply the leniency, how to apply it, and how it should be expressed to the child. The child should take it properly and understand it properly. And this itself, the child should be told that this leniency is given to him only because he's a child. However, once he will be an adult, it comes to kodshe doiros, there's no union of leniency. However, kodshe shah, at times we could, in certain areas, at times we could, and judging it properly, there could be a minion of leniency. This has been a gay this Rashi. As well, the Rebbe learned the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, being that today we begin saying Pirkei Avos, and it's a Mishnah in the first parak of Pirkei Avos. Suitable Mishnah. What would be a proper Mishnah to learn today? Says, obviously, the Rebbe says, we talk so much about Avas Yisrael. And expressing love to fellow Jew, that the appropriate Mishnah would be to learn a Mishnah what deals about Avas Yisrael. As a general introduction, Mishnah in Masechta Avos is Mila de Chasidusa. In other words, it's in Yonim of Derech Eretz, it's in Yonim, in other words, not in Yonim of Alpi Halacha. Halacha is not discussed in Pirkei Avos. Halacha is discussed elsewhere in Shas. Things beyond the halachic requirements, or in Yonim of Midas Tevos, this is what we find in Pirkei Avos. However, as an introduction to Pirkei Avos, we have Moshe Kibel Torah Messina. What shaykhs does Moshe Kibel Torah Messina have to Pirkei Avos? Here the Rebbe said it's quoted in Sfarim as follows. Being that the Gemara tells us, Chochma yesh bagoyim ta'amin, the Goyim have no shaykhs to Torah. However, to wisdom, they have a shaykhs. They are knowledgeable, they are intelligent. Chochma yesh bagoyim ta'amin, this we can believe. Memela, one may say that by Yidden as well, the inyonim of Derech Eretz, which are obviously not directly inyonim of Torah, this is not something which originates from Torah. This is something which the Chachamim have thought up on their own. Something which the Chachamim have instituted and recommended, Mila de Chasidus, how we shall act. However, it does not have a source in Torah. So that is why, as the very first and foremost, as an introduction to Masechta Avos, we find Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, to say the Kabbalah Torah, how it went from Moshe to Yeshua, from Yeshua to Zekanim, and so forth, that we shall know that by Yidden, not only the inyanim of Torah are from Sinai, but as well the Midas Toivos and all the inyanim which the Chachamim have taught us, everything originated at Sinai. Everything is part of Torah, and everything comes from Sinai. And we have to give it the same chashivas as any other inyan in Torah. It is not something which the Chachamim have taught up on their own. So that is why, as the very general introduction to Masechta Avos, we have the very first Mishnah. In Mishnah Beis, the Masechta starts already with various lessons, various Hayrayas. However, as well as in the second part of Mishnah Aleph. However, the very first beginning, the first Yesod of Masechtas Avos is to know that where all this originated from, that Masechta Avos is also part of Torah, and it's also part of what Moshe got Messina. If we are to look for a Mishnah which is outstanding in the inyan of Avos Yisrael, it's Mishnah Yud Beis. Hillel v'Shamai kiblu mehem, Hillel oimer, Hevei mitalmidav shel Aaron. Hillel is telling us that we have to be disciples of Aaron HaKohen. Oyev shalom, to love peace. Roidev shalom, pursue peace, run after peace. Oyev es habriyos, like everybody. Umekarvan l'Torah, and bring them close to Torah. Notice this is a very famous Mishnah. This Mishnah is quoted in Tanya in the very famous Perek Leiv, Perek Lamed Beis, which this is the chapter in Tanya which deals with the Hasidic interpretation of Avos Yisrael, and also refers to this Mishnah as a basic. How Hillel tells us as habriyos, that we are supposed to express love to briyos. What's the pshat briyos? As the Rebbe explains many times, there are many various definitions how we can define a human being. Adam, Ish, Gever, Enosh. Here the Mishnah uses a different expression. Here the Mishnah uses the expression Bria. He was created. In other words, we're talking about somebody who has no other milah within himself other than the fact that he was created by the Rebbeinu Shalom. He does not possess any other qualifications, no other pluses. And even to this type of person, we are told that we are also supposed to express love to him. He is a Bria, nothing but a Bria. Umikarvam l'Torah. As the Rebbe always stresses, and bring these people close to Torah. Not the pshat bring Torah close to them. In other words, not the pshat that we are permitted to go ahead and make adjustments on Torah. The Torah should be suitable to the person, but the person has to adjust himself to the Torah. In other words, we have to adjust ourselves that we should be suitable to fulfill all the requirements of Torah. So the Rebbe is learning in the Mishnah that being that the Mishnah gives as an introduction to the words of Hillel, the Mishnah gives Hillel v'Shamai kiblu mehem, that Hillel v'Shamai received from them. Who is them? If we look at Mishnah earlier, Hillel v'Shamai were disciples of Shemaya v'Avtalyon. They were disciples of Shemaya v'Avtalyon, and they received from Shemaya v'Avtalyon, what did they receive? Obviously Torah. Then the Mishnah goes ahead and tells us what Hillel said. Hillel said, Havei mitalmidav shel Aaron. Rebbe said, obviously, if the Mishnah would only come to quote Hillel's teachings, there is no need to give the introduction of Hillel v'Shamai kiblu mehem. Why do we have to refer back to Shemaya v'Avtalyon here? So we must say that the teachings of Shemaya v'Avtalyon, which are discussed in the prior Mishnah, serve as a basis to Hillel's teaching. In other words, we have to come on to Shmaya v'Avtalya in order, if we want to understand properly what Hillel says, Avei Talmidav Shel Aaron, we have to look back to the words of Shmaya v'Avtalya. Let us look back to Mishnah Yud. Shmaya v'Avtalya kiblu mehen. Shmaya omer, Ehoivet HaMalach. Love labor, love your work, love your occupation. Usnoa Sarabonus, and have a hatred to leadership. Va'al tisvada lo roshos, and don't become too intimate, too close with government, with people who are leaders, who are leading the country, who are leading the municipality. What shaykhs does this Mishnah have to the hero of Hillel? So firstly, the Rebbe said that there's a story in Chazal about Shmaya v'Avtalya. So I heard it correctly, that Shmaya v'Avtalya had a tremendous feeling for Ahavas Yisrael. And this is related that Shmaya v'Avtalya once met a Kohen Gadol. Shmaya v'Avtalya themselves were Gerim, they were converts. So the Kohen Gadol expressed himself to greet Shmaya v'Avtalya, blessed are all the nations. Kol Amamaya, all the nations. Why? Because he wanted to include Shmaya v'Avtalya as well. It seems like Shmaya v'Avtalya were not satisfied with this comment. Because in other words, they took it as a comment, as a derogatory way for the fact that they were Gerim. Otherwise, why does the Kohen Gadol refer to blessing all the nations? So it hurts them. So they commented back to the Kohen Gadol, blessed is everyone besides the Kohen Gadol who does not act properly. What do we see from this conversation? That Shmaya v'Avtalya had a high level of Ahavas Yisrael. In other words, Shmaya v'Avtalya could not have stand when somebody was tepid, when somebody got a derogatory statement because of the fact that he was a ger. The Shmaya v'Avtalya opinion was that if somebody is a ger as well, he has to be honored and beloved and cared for. So this in itself already serves as the basis for Shmaya v'Avtalya expression of Ahavas Yisrael. Shmaya says, Ehoivet HaMalacha. What's it say? We're telling the Yid that he has to like everybody. Havei Talmidav Shel Aaron, Oyev Shalom, Roidev Shalom. Rabbi referred that there's an obvious to Rav Nosson that if Aaron HaKohen would meet two people who were in an argument one with another, Aaron would get involved into every detailed argument which took place between two people and would get involved and even say differently to one and differently to the other. In other words, Aaron was Mishana. He would say differently in order to be able to bring about shalom, to bring about peace to these two people. He would use expressions, that other person feels so bad that you're angry at him. And would say the same to the other person. It never even began, but once the person heard this, and especially you heard it coming from somebody in a caliber like Aaron HaKohen, this created a feeling of shalom, of peace amongst Yidden. So this was Aaron HaKohen's famous occupation. Aaron was noted for making shalom. Oyev shalom, roidev shalom. However, to be at such a level, it's not easy. It's really not easy. It's very hard to say that a person should go ahead and express love to each and every Yid. How can we say that? People will say, I can't do it. To everyone, even the person that has no qualifications whatsoever, a person who is defined as a Bria, I should like him, I should love this person, I should run after him and make shalom between one person and another person. So here we refer back to Shmaya's teaching. At times it's not easy, it's not gishmak, it's not tasteful, it's not pleasant. However, you have to like the work. And just like a person has to like work at times when he doesn't even enjoy it, the very same b'negei Ahavas Yisrael as well. It's not easy, it's not an easy task. However, we have to know Shmaya is teaching us Ehoives HaMalacha. Person will say, fine. For whom is it befitting? For an average person. However, I have a contact with big people. I'm involved in big things. I am on the foot of leadership. I am about to accept the Rabbonis. and I'm going to become a great person and an outstanding person, how can you demand from me that I should have love to each and every, pardon my expression, schlep. I mean, the Rebbe didn't use this expression, but I mean to each and every person. So that's why he goes ahead, usnoas harabonos, have a hatred to rabbonos. Try and adjust yourself to be ausgemisht, to mingle with each and every yid. Don't say that I am higher, I am bigger, I am chashiva. Then the person will say, fine. However, I have to maintain very special contacts. Why do I need these contacts? Because at times I have to have contact into government. Because at times it may come to a gzeira chas v'shalom an yidin. It may come to a certain bad decree. So I have to have pull. I have to know what to do. And in order for me to have pull, I have to associate myself only with better class people. Rebbe referred to the pasuk in the Megillah, what Esther told Mordechai. If somebody is dressed with a sack, he can't come into the royal palace. And if he's going to chaver himself, if he's going to associate himself with people who dress in a sack, naturally the same reflection will be on him. So how will he be able to have an input in government? How will he be able to have an input when he will be needed to call off exile? Rebbe says, don't worry about it. That's not your worry. Al tisvada la roshos. Don't become too intimate, too strongly involved with the people who lead government, with the people who head government. Don't worry about it. When time will come that a problem will arouse, the Rebbe will help us. Don't worry about that. Your union is al tisvada la roshos. Don't get too close and intimate with special high-class people. So memela, you'll be able to keep on mingling and loving each and every yid. So you wouldn't have any inyanim that are stopping you from it. This is the shayches of Mishnah Yud to the hero of Avos Yisrael. As well we come to Mishnah Yud Aleph. Mishnah Yud Aleph is Aftalya Noima. Aftalya says, Chachamim izaharu b'devreichem. Chachamim, be careful with your words. Shema techoyvu choyvas golus, v'tiglu lemkoy mayim aroyim. What's the pshat? Person will say, you're telling me to be involved with everyone. You're telling me to express love to everyone. How can I do it? At the time, who knows with whom I may get involved? Here the Rebbe referred there are halachas in Shulchan Aruch about bad talmidim. And the Alter Rebbe in Hilchas Talmud Torah discusses it, how a Rebbe has to be very careful and not to exclude talmidim. In other words, a person cannot say, this is a bad student, I will not want to teach him, and exclude him out of the class. A Rav has to be extremely careful when he says that. In other words, he has to weigh his words many, many times before he excludes a student. Memela, Aftalion tells us, if you are going to think that you don't want to be involved by expressing love to every Yid, why? Because it may lead that you're going to be involved, your words will be misinterpreted properly, and you're going to get involved with all types of students that are unwanted and unwished for. So Aftalion is giving us an eitz on that. Aftalion says, Hizaru b'devreichem. Rabbi says every word in the Chachamim is extremely accurate, especially when we're talking in Mishnah. Rabbi quoted from the Rambam, how the Rambam tells us how every word in Mishnah is extremely accurate, and we find in Gemara how the Gemara treats Mishnah with a lot of honor, how every word is to the fullest accuracy. The Chachamim don't say talk little. Like for instance, there's an expression in Mishnah, Moyer ma'at v'asei harbei. Here the Chacham, Aftalion doesn't use this expression. Aftalion here uses the expression, be careful what you say. In other words, don't talk. Don't reduce your saying. Say a lot. On the contrary, you're teaching Torah, teach to everyone. But naturally, you have to be very careful. Chachamim, if you're wise people, hizaharu b'devreichem. Be very careful in your words. Shema techu v'choyvas golus. Your words may be misinterpreted by talmidim aboyim achareichem, by talmidim what will come after you, and they will not be proper talmidim, and they will not understand you properly. So therefore, your obligation is to talk in a very careful manner. However, a person cannot say he will close himself up, he will not teach Torah, he will not relate Torah, he will not express Avos Yisrael. Why? Because perhaps somebody who's unworthy of the Avos Yisrael, somebody who's unworthy of his teachings, is also going to join the class, is also going to join the group. And he's going to close himself up and not have no shaykhs to anybody. Mishnah tells us no. You have to do yours. He's a haru b'devreichem. Keep on saying dvarim, keep on spreading Torah, keep on spreading mayones achsidus, keep on expressing love to each and every yid. However, at the same time, he's a haru. Do it in a very, very careful way and in a very careful manner to see to it that your words shouldn't be misinterpreted properly, because if they will be misinterpreted properly, then it'll be your fault. So Mamela, here we see how the saying of Hillel, Havei mitalmidav shalang, oyev shalom, v'roidev shalom, oyev esabriyas and mekarvan l'Torah, which is a Mishnah, which stresses the highest level of Avos Yisrael. This comes behemshech to the Mishnahs prior to that, Mishnah Yud and Yud Aleph. That is why in Mishnah Yud Beis we have the introduction of Hillel v'Shammai kiblu mehem, because it's based on the teachings of Shmaya v'Avtalya, which we have just learned before in Mishnah Yud and Yud Aleph, that Hillel can come out with his teaching of Havei mitalmidav shel Aaron, oyev shalom, roidev shalom, oyev esabriyas and mekarvan l'Torah. Excuse me? Which one more? Maim Roim. Go ahead, I don't know, but say it. I don't recall. Mayim Haroim, the Rebbe kept on referring Shemet HaChoy v'Choy v'Zgolus v'Siglo M'Koyim Mayim Haroim, meaning, as just mentioned, that the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch discusses that at times there are unwanted Talmidim, there are Talmidim Roim, and Talmidim who are unworthy. So you have to be so careful to prepare even for such type of Talmidim as well, and to see to it that they should be able to get it in the proper context. Of course, the Farbrengen, the Rebbe also learned the Rashi in this week's Sedra, which is getting very late. Just going over to another initial payal, the Rebbe said that being that today was Shabbos Mevorachim Iyar, and when we bless a month, we bless the entire month, with all the days of the Chodesh. In the month of Iyar, there's one day which is very outstanding, and that is the day of Beis Iyar, 2 days in the month of Iyar. 2 days in the month of Iyar to Lubavitch Hasidim is very significant, because it is the birthday of the Rebbe Maharash. And as we say in the Sfira, in the counting of Sfira, this Beis Iyar, it comes out to be Teferes Shebeteferes, the beauty of beauties. And this is how it is referred to the Rebbe Maharash. And the Rebbe added on that the Rebbe Maharash is known for a very famous saying which was constantly being repeated by the Frierdiker Rebbe, that the Rebbe Maharash used to express himself, the Welt sagt, the world says, am nicht, arunter geht man arriba. If we can't go under, then we go over. And the Rebbe Maharash added on, in ich sag, and I say, am geit lekatchila arriba. This is the very famous expression we hear from the Rebbe many times, lekatchila arriba, meaning that whenever we approach any type of inyan in Ruchnias, any type of inyan in Torah and Mitzvahs, our attitude has to be lekatchila arriba, meaning lekatchila, immediately to go over. In other words, we have to take everything with a very extremely broad way. In other words, not to hesitate and be reluctant. Should we get involved into an inyan of Kedusha, or shouldn't we get involved into an inyan of Kedusha? The teaching of the Rebbe Maharash is that b'negeya everything we have to do it in the format of lekatchila arriba. The Rebbe also referred to something which he spoke about in the Farbrengen the day after Yud Aleph Nissen, Yud Beis Nissen, and that Farbrengen the Rebbe urged that publications should be published which should contain in Yonim Chedushay Torah that should be written b'shaychus to Yud Aleph Nissen. In other words, in honor of Yud Aleph Nissen, the Rebbe's inyan is always to tie in everything with an inyan shel Torah. So for Yud Aleph Nissen as well, the Rebbe says it would be very appropriate to come out with various publications. However, the publication should deal solely with inyanim in Torah, Chedushim in Torah, and to involve people from all different types of segments. And people, and when we're talking about people and learning, naturally there are people who excel in one inyan of Torah, others excel in another inyan of Torah, to see to it that these publications should entail inyanim in Torah, and all the miktzayos of Torah, and all subjects of Torah should be in these publications. Rebbe added on today, once we will have these publications, it will be proper to select from these publications the real top essays that are written in the format of Teferes Sheb'Teferes, like you use the expression, just like we find in Negei Beis Iyah, the day is called Teferes Sheb'Teferes, the best of the best, the beauty of the beauty. The same thing in Negei, these articles in Torah that will be written and published, we should be able to make a special publication of those articles that can be defined as Teferes Sheb'Teferes in Torah. These inyanim should be published separately. The Rebbe also, towards the very end of the Farbrengen, again spoke that it's customary that on Teferes Sheb'Teferes there's a gathering. Teferes Sheb'Teferes is the day of the founding of Tzir Agudas Chabad. So Tzir Agudas Chabad always makes a Chassidish Farbrengen on that day. The Rebbe said it's appropriate to mention it already in today's Farbrengen. The Rebbe gave mashke for it, which will be taking place next Motzei Shabbos, and this is a proper day that at the gathering, not only the resolutions from previous years should be read, and this year's resolution should be just read in the format of reading resolutions, but everyone that will participate and everyone will really evaluate the great meaning of the day and see to it to take upon proper resolutions that are befitting for this day of Teferes Sheb'Teferes, and everything in the format of what the teaching of the Rebbe Maharash is l'katchila aridah.